Hello, and welcome to today's session on developing a sleep schedule. I'm Betsy Malarczyk. I'm a learning skills specialist with the Academic Resource Center at Georgetown University. And today we're going to be talking about how to implement habits to help you stick to your goals of going to sleep at a more reasonable time. So before you can begin to approach adjusting your sleep patterns, it's important to understand why is it that you don't get enough sleep. So some of the reasons that we're going to be discussing today are folks who stay up late to complete schoolwork. Potentially more common are folks staying up late, meaning to complete schoolwork, but actually procrastinating. Just an inability to fall asleep due to high energy or insomnia, and wanting to do something fun after a work-heavy day. So again, understanding why you specifically don't get enough sleep is going to be a helpful piece in trying to approach how you can begin to rectify this. So to begin, when should you be sleeping? The key rules to consider when figuring out your sleep schedule is making sure that you're generally going to sleep within the same period of time and that you're waking up the same period of time. So I generally suggest to folks that you try to go to sleep within the same 2-hour period each evening, and similarly trying to wake up within the same 2 or 3-hour period each morning. Of course, you can't necessarily stick to the same times every day, but you're less likely to have one day totally throw off your schedule if you can be somewhat consistent. What I think is helpful to keep in mind, though, is that you should schedule your sleep around your productivity levels more so than someone else's. Something I hear a lot is students saying, oh, I should wake up at 7 a.m., but I actually wake up at 10 a.m. Why should you be waking up at 7 a.m.? If there's a clear reason for it, such as you're most productive in the morning, then yes, wake up at 7 a.m. But if you need that sleep from 7 to 10, there's nothing wrong with adjusting your schedule so that you're staying up later and waking up later. It's all about what works for you personally and your levels of productivity. So related to that, something that can be helpful to think about when assessing your own levels of productivity are chronotypes. So chronotypes are an idea of diurnal preferences. They're not the same thing exactly as circadian rhythms, but they're similar in that these are patterns that emerge based on when your energy is highest and lowest. So there's a little bit of science behind how folks tend to be more productive during certain times of day. It's related somewhat to the idea that before we had developed, humans tended to need folks with different sleep patterns in order to help keep guard over the group and keep the group safe. And we still see some of that today and how our productivity is impacted. So chronotypes use 4 different main categories. They are not exclusive. Sometimes there can be a little bit of overlap, but these 4 types are named for animals. So the most common that we see are the bear and the lion. The bear is someone whose energy levels correlate with the sun. This is someone who works very well in a 9-to-5 kind of situation. Their energy levels will correlate with the sun, and they're most productive in the morning. So the bear is also going to have their energy fade as the sun goes down. The lion is also a daytime worker, but lions tend to be early risers. They are most productive in the morning and have difficulty sustaining energy in the afternoon and evening. The wolf is typically what we would call the night owl. This is a late riser, someone who's most productive in the evenings and throughout the night, and has difficulty being productive in the morning. And then there's also the dolphin, who's an anxious sleeper, someone who has difficulty falling asleep. And this is someone who's going to work more productively in the morning, but it will take them a little bit of time to get going. So why it's interesting to think about these levels of productivity is because it also helps you figure out when you should be sleeping. A wolf, for example, someone who is going to be more productive in the evening, they might do most of their homework after classes instead of before classes, and maybe they've scheduled their classes late. There's nothing wrong with them starting their work later and then maybe going to bed regularly at 2 in the morning. As long as that person is still getting sufficient sleep, then there can be all kinds of flexibility in terms of when that person goes to bed and when that person wakes up. So sleep patterns are all very individualized. If you're not sure what category you fall into for this, then think about over the next week or so marking on a planner or on a post-it even when you're most productive and when you're least productive, and that can be helpful information. So part of what is going to help you develop a helpful sleep routine is creating an intentional nighttime routine. So this is going to be a routine that you do before going to bed that will help you maintain a sense of ritual, but it will also help you wind down from the day and help you prepare physically and mentally for going to bed. What should be part of your intentional nighttime routine? First of all is a realistic bedtime. Be realistic about when you will actually go to bed. Something that I often hear again is someone saying, I'm going to go to bed at 8 p.m., even though I typically go to bed at midnight. There's no need to try to do more than what is physically possible for you. So be realistic. If you go to bed at midnight, plan on going to bed at midnight. Likewise, start with small changes and work your way up to bigger adjustments. If you do want to start going to bed at 8 p.m., don't immediately start with 8 p.m. Work your way up. If the goal is going to bed at 8 p.m., start by going to bed at 11 p.m. We are more likely to sustain habits if we start small and stick to a small habit that is attainable. And then from that, we can work to the bigger adjustments. It's also helpful to set bedtime reminders well before you want to be asleep. Often folks will set a reminder on their phone, which a lot of phones have this as a feature that you can set a sleep reminder, and they'll set it for the time that they want to be in bed. When that reminder goes off, you're in the middle of doing something else, so it's very easy to ignore that reminder. Instead, set that bedtime reminder for the beginning of your nighttime routine. That way, you have time to ease out of your daytime activities. So it's important to note that self-control and focus can decrease throughout the day. And that's why it's so important to figure out your bedtime routine before it's time to execute it. If you tell yourself you're going to do this great evening routine, you're going to read a book, you're going to make tea, and you'll figure out the tea later, you'll figure out the book later. By the time you get to 8 p.m. or whenever it is you want to start winding down for the day, you've lost a lot of that focus and self-control that allows you to make those decisions. So plan out your evening when you have more presence of mind. Do it first thing in the morning. Maybe do it on a Sunday morning for the next Monday. And as much as you can set up that space beforehand, that's going to help you execute it. So the anatomy of a routine, what does a nighttime routine look like? First of all, there's a clear break from your daytime activities. Typically, I would recommend about an hour before you want to be in bed. Some folks might prefer more time. Some people may only need 30 minutes. It again depends on your habits and how much time you need to de-stress and decompress. But you want there to be a clear break. Then you should have a series of calming, screen avoidant activities that relax you, such as reading or listening to music. The goal here is to, again, get something that physically separates you from daytime, which we'll be talking about some of the things to avoid in a moment, and something that's going to allow you to move into that sleep kind of state of mind. And then also have that specific time when you get into bed. So again, having this precursor to when you're actually getting in bed is going to help you stick to a bedtime, not only because it's setting you up to intentionally sleep better, but it also provides you with a buffer in case you have trouble sticking to your bedtime. So what should you avoid before going to sleep? Blue light. This is something you've probably heard before, but blue light is the light that emanates from phone screens, tablet screens, computer screens that confuses our bodies and makes us think it's daytime. So being on devices directly before bed can impact your sleep and make it harder for you to go to sleep. A really easy way to approach this is to set up blue light filters on your devices. A lot of devices have settings already that you can turn on so that the light, maybe around 10 p.m., will switch to a blue light filtered background. So Windows, I believe this feature is called Night Light. Android, it's called blue light filter. Macs call it the night shift. If you can't find this setting or you have a phone that doesn't have this feature, know that there are also a lot of apps that exist to create blue light filters as well. You may also consider purchasing computer glasses. These are glasses that filter out blue light as well, and can be good if you feel like you use devices a lot in the evening and don't really like the way blue light looks. And these can be purchased pretty cheaply on Amazon.com. So if you look around, there's a lot of options. Even if you have set up blue light filters, still be mindful of the ways in which you're using your devices. Try to avoid infinite scrolling, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, because sometimes you get sucked in and that makes it harder to walk away from that activity. Also, to avoid before going to sleep is food. If you have late classes and you get out of class at 9 p.m. and then it's time to sit down and eat dinner at 9 p.m., try to give yourself a little bit of a buffer before going to sleep, because eating right before bed, that will provide you with energy. And so you're already setting your up to have trouble falling asleep. If you tend to snack in the evening, try to proactively set up a different kind of nighttime snack. Something that promotes sleep, like chamomile tea, can be super helpful. Even something just like a glass of water, some flavored seltzer, something like that can be nice. But if you have that impulse, don't try to reject it. Instead, try to prepare for it. And then also be mindful of the kind of exercise you're doing in the evening. A lot of exercise can leave you super energized. So as you're tracking how you feel throughout the day, be mindful of what kinds of exercise you're doing in the evening and if that's having an impact. If it is, try either scheduling your bedtime for later in the evening or trying a different kind of exercise, something like yoga that's going to calm you down rather than amp you up. So, what if you are someone who stays up late working, you have the intention of going to bed at a reasonable hour, but you never do? You know it's time to go to bed, and then you just keep on working. First, work backwards. Try to figure out when you want to wake up and then how much sleep you need. And from there, determine your bedtime. So instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to go to bed at 10 because that seems like a reasonable thing to do. If you don't have that clear, finite, kind of wake up deadline, then it's easier to push back that 10 p.m. to 11 to 12 to 1. So figure out what your morning looks like, and based on that, how much sleep you need to give yourself a hard deadline of when you need to be to sleep. And then instead of just setting a reminder for when you're going to bed, set a reminder an hour before your bedtime routine. So let's say you want to be in bed by 11, your bedtime routine, you want to start at 10, set an alarm for 9 or a reminder for 9 that you need to think about going to bed in an hour. Why this can be helpful is that it helps you mentally assess where you are in your tasks, and it lets you prepare to either finish up the tasks or to prioritize based on what you want to do with the evening. This is one of the reasons too that having a bedtime routine is helpful, because it provides a little bit of buffer. Let's say an hour passes, it's time for you to start your bedtime routine, but you aren't ready to finish working yet. It's okay to skip that routine if you must. What isn't okay is to skip that bedtime. So seeing the routine as a flexible time to allow yourself to keep working during is all right, but then you have to be aware of that bedtime and stick with it. So with this, it's kind of just about letting yourself know what your plan is and constantly updating yourself and your routine based on what your more awake self wanted you to be doing. So what if you suffer from revenge bedtime procrastination? This term, revenge bedtime procrastination, became quite popular in China, where they have incredibly long working days. And I think it's called 996, working from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And with this term, it basically means that you didn't get time to do anything during the day. So now you're going to try to make up by doing something fun in the evening. This means you're procrastinating because there's something you want to do for you. What it is helpful to think about is, how can you do something fun for yourself that's intentional and not draining and distracting? If you're just on your phone scrolling and it doesn't feel good, but you can't walk away because you feel like you didn't have any time, try instead to be very, very intentional about doing something that you'll enjoy more and that will rejuvenate you more. So one idea is to pre-plan a list of relaxing activities to do as part of your bedtime routine. That means when you're awake, when you have better focus and self-control, write down things you might do and be specific. Write down a specific book you might read, a specific movie you might watch, even an episode of a TV show you want to catch up on. And then if it comes time to late at night and you find yourself doing something else, something procrastination related, but it doesn't feel good, you're on Instagram, you're checking out those likes, look at this list that you made and choose one of those activities. It's still procrastination, but it's something that feels better. And especially if it's something with a finite end, like a TV episode or a movie, then it'll be easier to walk away from. It's also useful to think about the morning and having something personal that you're motivated to do then as motivation for going to bed at a reasonable hour. If you don't want to go to bed because you feel like you haven't had time for yourself, then try scheduling something for the morning, like even just going for a walk, making yourself an exciting breakfast, even if it's, again, watching an episode of something in the morning. If you know you have that to look forward to, if you're able to wake up at a certain time, then that will motivate you to go to bed a little bit earlier. So what should you do if you know you should be working and you're just procrastinating? So for this is more of a procrastination technique as much as it is a bedtime technique. But when you notice that you're procrastinating, set an intentional goal for the following 10 minutes. So that means you're on your phone, you're not doing anything, but you know you have a paper due in 2 days. Set a specific goal, something you could do in 10 minutes, like write 2 sentences, read over the assignment prompt, read 1 page, something really, really small, very, very attainable, and then start working on it. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Once that timer goes off, see how you've done. If you completed your goal, great. Set another goal, set another timer, and try again. But if those 10 minutes are up and you didn't complete your goal, go to bed. Walk away. Because basically, if you're not working, your time will be better spent sleeping so that you do that work later. But having a timer can help stay on task with this because it's something external and it helps you check in with where you are compared to your goals. So a few notes as well. I started by saying that you want to try to go to bed and wake up within the same period of time. There are exceptions. First of all, weeknights versus weekends. I know I'm someone where I don't get enough sleep during the week, and then on the weekend I try to catch up, and I need to. Definitely catch up on sleep on the weekend, but don't stray too far from your typical bedtime routine. So that's where that 2 to 3 hour buffer comes in. If you're waking up at 7 during the week and you want to wake up at noon, maybe on the weekend you need to set an alarm for 10:30. You can still sleep in a little bit, but if you go too far the other direction, it's going to throw off your routine. And then what happens if you're staying up late to meet a deadline? The next day, you just want to be mindful of your sleep patterns and avoid as much as you can taking massive naps or staying up till 5 in the morning only to fall asleep for 8 hours the next day. You do need to take care of yourself. And again, sometimes your body just needs sleep and that's okay. But thinking of getting over a deadline as you would getting over jet lag can be helpful. For jet lag, you're just supposed to stay up even though you're tired and then go to bed when you would normally go to bed. Or at least at a bedtime, something like 8 p.m., which for me is way too early, but if I'm jet lagged, sometimes that's what I work to get to. Think of that in a similar way the day after a very, very late or very early deadline. So we'll have time for questions in a moment. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat. Wanted to let you know that our next webinar will be on Wednesday, October 19th, 5-day test prep. We're going to be going over how to make a focused study schedule for midterms and how to use the study cycle to your advantage. So if you have any questions, again, please add them to the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for stopping by and best of luck with your sleep schedule.